how we've arrived at OTES and the evaluation system. First off, what you need to know is this isn't a Euclid initiative. As you all are aware, the reason it says OTES, it is OTES, is because it's Ohio Teacher Evaluation System. So this is something that's going on throughout the state. How you go about getting there and the actual system that you decide on, there is a little bit of leeway. But with that said, there's not as much as once thought in regards to the LEA, which is the local education, our district. That's what is referred to as an LEA, is supposed to have some say in the process. But what we've learned, again, through this last year and into this year, we had a committee comprised of half administrators, half teachers. And so we've worked really well through that process, but as all of you know, well, those of you who know me, know that I don't like to procrastinate. I like to be ahead of the game. But in this case, the exercise and the lesson to be learned here was don't be ahead of the game, because all I did was I would have been better off, our group would have been better off procrastinating, waiting for the state to just say, really, this is what we want you to do, so just adopt it. So that is what ended up happening. We ended up adopting the Ohio evaluation system, despite our efforts to sort of align and come up with a different system that we thought would be more objective. But in the end, the committee ended up going with the state's model. So the general premise and the goal of this whole evaluation system is to have improved practice within the classroom. It's to help teachers become better. Now, the one thing about this evaluation system, and those, again, I use myself because you know, all know how I am, I'm candid and upfront with you. Those of us who are perfectionists in the room, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't one, because one, you'd all call me on that. But two, we're used to an evaluation system where, if we're just being honest about it, that year after year, many of us, not all, but many of us are told that we're doing very well, and there's no areas that need improvement or very little. And the fact of the matter is, if we're all being truthful with ourselves, and myself included, there are things that I certainly have to work on and I could be better at. Even the areas in which I do well in, there's always room for improvement, and I know that we have to be open to the fact that we all can grow and become better professionals. So that is the purpose of this. It's not a gotcha or I'm trying to catch you doing something wrong. It really isn't. And you will find we had all gone through the training, all administrators, I had all central office and all building administrators go through this process, and we did learn together. And quite frankly, many of us were advocating for the teachers, because what you will find, and the reason I'm saying this whole notion of we're used to being excellent in our reviews, is that in order to be accomplished in your observations, you have to be nothing less than perfect. And we all stepped out of there saying, and many of you know how I evaluate, and I think I used to be in my younger years, for certain, more straight out of the classroom. I was a little bit more, probably picky and could find things that would be, thought of as being, wow, you're really, nitpicking this. But as I've gotten further removed from the classroom, I'm probably not as stringent in my observations. But I will tell you, when I was looking at some of these, when we went through our training, all we did was calibrate and exercise after exercise, meaning we kept watching video after video, and we were just critiquing the teachers. What I thought was accomplished and phenomenal, and I'd take this teacher in a heartbeat, I'd hire him or her in an instant, would end up being proficient in many cases. So I tell you this because the example they give is that accomplished is thought of as rock solid, and then proficient is solid and still great. But what we have to do is train ourselves to, again, think of proficient as being excellent. It's just not accomplished. And once I get through this whole speech with you and I get to the last slide, you're going to see that it's not going to be so important at the end of the day if you get proficient or accomplished. And I'll show you how we get there, and I will help you through this process. And it's not going to be, I think, as scary as what you think. So we'll get there. So who gets evaluated with this system? Teachers who are working under a license and have at least 50% of their day spent with kids in instruction. So some people will say, well, why aren't speech teachers included in this? Because 50% of their day or more is working with kids. They're not working under a teacher's license, so there's the difference. So just so you know how that will work. As you are probably aware, and again, I don't really know where you're at with your level of knowledge in this process, but 50% of the evaluation is teacher performance, which is really observation. The other 50% is growth measures, and this is where the anxiety comes. But again, I'm going to help you through that. So House Bill 153, all of this came out of House Bill 153, and that is how we've arrived at needing a new system in place. So everyone is evaluated every year. So those of you who have been tenured for a long time and you got to be evaluated every 3 years, and that's kind of a nice luxury, that is gone. It doesn't matter if you're a first year teacher, second year, 35th year teacher, you are all going to be evaluated every year. There's one exception that may take place, and we're not finished with this conversation, because recently I just saw, this is ever changing, and I'm trying to keep up with the legislature as it goes. So as of a week and a half ago, I read something that was talking about accomplished teachers, that if you are rated accomplished, you can have it every other year. But prior to that, it was, yeah, it could be every other year, but you're still going to have one observation and you have to do a portfolio. Well, gee, thanks a lot. I mean, that's, other than all you're missing there is one observation. You're replacing another observation with a portfolio. Big deal. That's not, to me, an incentive to be accomplished. So we have to work through a board policy, and we are going to consider, believe me, we would want as much as you as administrators. I could tell you, putting my principal hat on, that if you're accomplished, I'd love to see you in 2 years. You know, it's just one less person that I have to evaluate. So that we're looking at. So there are multiple evaluation factors that we'll get into. So what is comprised? What are you looking at when you evaluate me? We're going to hit that. The process, the whole evaluation system aligns to standards. I won't put you on the spot and say how many of you even knew that there were Ohio teacher standards. I'm sure most of you did know that. But if I asked you to recite them right now, I know you could not probably do that. And nor could I, to be honest. I know the general 6, 7 standards because it's different for principals and teachers. But I can tell you that this aligns to standards, which is assessment, learning environment, students, differentiation, those types of things. Those are the standards, but we'll get into them. There are going to continue to be 2 formal observations. The one exception, if you're on a plan of assistance, there will be 3. And they have to be a minimum of 30 minutes. What I recommend, and more of a secondary problem, secondary teachers, the periods are about 50, 52 minutes at the high school. My recommendation is that they see the entire lesson. My same recommendation will go for elementary, and I will be meeting with the principals and assistant principals to go through this. The reason being, you are going to miss a lot of things if you just go 30 minutes, because I'm going to either miss the beginning of your lesson or the end of your lesson, and you sort of need to see everything in between. So I don't want principals spending an hour and a half in there, and again, the reason being why, the amount of time. You can do the math here, you see how many of you there are in here, excluding some tutors and some other personnel, and there are 2 administrators that have to do this. Sometimes, when you do the math, when I walk you through the process, you'll see the amount of hours that go into this. It's astronomical. And so I don't expect them to spend an hour and a half in your room, but maybe you guys can, in collaboration, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, kind of a lesson. And anything beyond that, because they have to script and write every single thing down, an hour and a half is, your hand's going to fall off. In my case, it would be typing, because you all know I can't read my own writing, so I have to type. So walkthroughs. This has been an issue in the past in regards to, can you use walkthroughs in evaluation? The answer is yes, and not only yes, it has to be included. The state HB 153 states explicitly that walkthroughs must count as part of the evaluation. Now, let me just say this, and I say this every time and I emphasize it, that there are walkthroughs, there are McCrow walkthroughs, which you all know. Someone joked to me the other day, wow, you don't have your iPad with you, you're just walking through. Yes, I don't have my iPad. You usually have them tied around your neck, you central office administrators, which, I can laugh about that, that's funny, because we do have our little iPads. But what I did the other day in 2 buildings is I literally just did what I'm going to talk about, which is walkthroughs. I'm the assistant superintendent, I'm the principal, whatever it is, and I'm walking through and I'm just observing. And I sat in some classrooms and I participated in those types of walkthroughs. Didn't have my iPad. So there's the difference. The McCrow walkthroughs, I'm not going to download all the information and say, Tabitha, you did, on Bloom's taxonomy, you had remember 12 times. No, we're not doing that. That's not going to be included in your evaluation. What will be included and has to be included is my walkthrough as the principal, and I see Tabitha doing something excellent with her kids. Or conversely, I walk in and I see Trish belittling a child. I could say this because she could care less because she's not going to be evaluated. No. Because, well, let's face it. Some of you are not going to, you're enduring this conversation and don't have to endure my conversation, but I appreciate you being here. But anyway, I walk into Trish's room and I see her belittling a child. Well, obviously, it's my role as an assistant superintendent or the principal or whatever to point that out as I'm doing my walkthrough. So what would happen is, as a follow-up, I would say, Trish, I need to see you, and I saw you in that child's face, and something like that. Or conversely, like I said, Tabitha did something excellent, whatever it may be. So my walkthroughs have to count what I say to all of you is important, because you have a right to know. As I'm walking through, if I see something that I'm not comfortable with as a principal, I'm not going to hold on to that, and then at the end of the year, put in your evaluation, oh, I saw you belittling a child 4.5 months ago, but I never said it to you. That's not fair. So walkthroughs have to count. There have to be multiple walkthroughs, and by that they mean, you know, obviously several. They're supposed to be frequent and ongoing. I'll get into more about walkthroughs and the holistic rating in just a minute. So there are 4 assigned ratings, and those are accomplished, proficient, developing, and ineffective. So at the end, you are going to come up with a rating, and these are it. So, by the way, I know you're taking notes, but Mr. Paporis, I forwarded you. I don't have any problem with you forwarding my email to them if they want. So there's accomplished, proficient, developing, and ineffective. You will have a rating at the end. You will have a rating in your growth measures and in your performance, and then a final rating, and we'll talk about what that looks like. So we also need to, part of H-Bill 153, I keep saying that, House Bill 153, is identifies measures of student growth. So we'll get into that as well. So that has to be included. 50% of your evaluation has to be related to growth measures. And then the other part of this is we must provide you with PD, professional development, and support to poorly performing teachers. So you're either going to have a growth plan or an improvement plan as a result. 98% of you will have professional development plans, growth plans, setting goals for the next year, etc. And I'll walk you through that process. Kristen, thanks. So the evaluation framework, and I don't know how many of you can see this, but again, accomplished, proficient, developing, and ineffective. And then it just shows you the breakdown of the 2 different percentages, student growth, and then this teacher performance, 50%. So what is included in teacher performance? Let me give you some ideas, okay? So student is in there. How you relate to the student, what's happening with the students. The learning environment, these all relate to the standards. The content that you're teaching, how well do you know your content? Assessment is a big piece, hint, we'll talk later about assessment. Collaboration and communication, are you collaborating with your colleagues? Is your communication appropriate, not only to colleagues or students, but parents? All of those different factors, they're looking at how you communicate in growth, and along that is ethics. They look at ethics and, you know, are you, ethical in how you're, presenting yourself, and also do you arrive to work on time every day? Those types of things. So professional responsibilities. So as of July 1 of this year, we need to have a board-adopted policy for our what we're going to be doing. And what's nice is there are many great examples out there. I was at a session not too long ago, a week ago, by some lawyers that had some nice language. And what's really easy about this is most of it's in law, so our board policy is just going to mirror what's in the law, essentially. But there's one out of OEA has one, ODE has one. So we're just trying to work together on our committee of the teachers and administrators to come up with what that policy will look like. So July 1, we have to have that done. We are looking at changing the dates. Some of you are aware, right now it's January for some people, and then it's April for tenured people. We are allowed to, ORC, which is Ohio Revised Code, is moving it to May 1st and May 10th, but we still have to negotiate it with our group, with the teachers, because in your contract it says April 1 and 10, and I pretty much was pleading with Dave to say, can you please cut us some slack? And it only works to everyone's benefit, just to allow more time for the evaluation process. So we're hoping to get that moved. Again, we talked about accomplished teachers, and that's up in the air right now. At the end of the year, what happens? There's this ETPES. They love acronyms, as everyone does in education. So there's OTES, OPES, which is Ohio Teacher, Ohio Principal. Then you have ETPES, which I don't even know what it stands for, but I know it's the reporting system for how we're going to report all your scores. So the principals will get into this system, and what will happen is they will have, Linda's name will be in there, and it will say 0% complete. If I were to go in right now, it would say 0% complete. And so then as it goes, as you do your self-assessment, it'll say 10% complete. Then you do an observation, 50%, and then it just keeps track of that. Then at the end, what we have to do is go in and show what our growth measures will be. It will calculate it all, and then it will come up with a final rating for Linda that will say proficient. And then what I have to do, or your principals will do, we haven't worked this out yet because it's still new, we'll then send it off, but it won't say Linda Holtzheimer and proficient. What it will say is, of Chardon Hills staff, it'll probably be on a district level, but 82 teachers were proficient, 10 were developing, 1 was effective, 3 were accomplished. It's just numbers that go. It's not your names. As of right now, who knows? We all know that can change. So that's our tracking system. You all will get, this is new too, your principals now have recently, they're going to be signing on with this ETPES, and then they have to go through and get their rosters verified to make sure that all the teachers are in, and then assign your growth measures, and then that's how we'll proceed. So I have to enter principals will enter all of you, we'll get our workflow. We're still working in that process. It's been a little bit fuzzy and a lot of work, and it's driving me crazy at the moment. But we're trying to get that all squared away. So that's how the reporting system will flow. And we talked about POAs. So that's at least 3 formal observations. Kristen? So now the evaluation process, what does it look like? And I forgot one thing on here, and I don't know why I did, because I think I associate it with goal setting. But the first thing that's going to happen, and these are a little bit out of order, so what will happen first is you will fill out a self-assessment. That's what I forgot to put. Actually, I did fix it, but I think when I saved it, I saved the wrong PowerPoint, so my updates aren't on this one. So self-assessment is the first thing you're going to do. It's pages and pages and pages. You'll look at it, you'll fill it out, and basically what you're trying to do is identify the areas in which you need more work. As we stated, there's going to be areas, and it's going to align to the standards. So it might turn out that you need more help in differentiation or assessment of kids. And so what will emerge then is some information to guide you on how to create your goals. Because the next step is creating goals for yourself. You will create 2 as a result of your self-assessment. And that will be done collaboratively with your principal or assistant principal, whoever the administrator is. Now, the level of support and what I'm going to tell the administrators, how much input they have into creating your goals will depend on what type of, where you're at in your evaluation. First, everyone has a blank slate starting right now, so it will be a collaborative effort between the administrator and teacher. But if you have an accomplished teacher, to me, that person can have a little bit more leeway in terms of creating their goals. But if you have an ineffective or developing teacher, as the principal, I would want to have some input. The reason being, and I know none of you would ever do this, but let's just say, I'll pick on the next person, Suzanne, because I already picked up Trish. So Suzanne now, that's what they get for sitting in the front. So Suzanne then creates a goal that says, it shows that maybe she needs some help communicating with parents. So she says, I'm going to communicate with 3 parents this year. I'm going to make 3 parent phone calls. Well, obviously, we all know that that's not a very lofty or rigorous goal. So therefore, we want to eliminate that, and that won't happen if I'm the principal in collaboration with you. I'd say, well, why don't you do 3 phone calls a week, or whatever it's going to be, to make it more realistic as a goal. So not that that would happen, but just to err on the side of caution that we're just making sure that we're coming up with rigorous goals. And the goal setting part is really 10% of your evaluation. Not that I'm trying to discount it or say that it's not important, because it is, but just to give you a perspective of weighing things. So you'll come up with your goal setting. That will all happen at a meeting, at your first meeting with your administrator. Then what will happen is there will be classroom observations that will be scheduled at least this first year. We've agreed that we will schedule those with you. And I'm going to emphasize to the administrators that unless there is some absolute crisis, we know how hard you're going to plan for these, so we don't want I don't want the principals skipping out on those. And not that they would skip out, but if something happens, definition of emergency will be dictated sort of collectively. We'll come up with what an emergency means as administrators, because 2 kids fighting, to me, I'll deal with them at some point in the day, but I'm not going to miss an observation, that kind of thing. So we know we've been told by teachers the importance of that, and I respect that. So there'll be prearranged observations. So those will be scheduled, and then I will show you the rubric that they will use. The other reason why I did not copy packets for you, one, it's a ton of paper, and if I had to do that I'm seeing every teacher in this district, that would be a lot of paper. So I will show you the link. All you have to do, we'll go into it and see, but just go into ODE's website and just put in OTES, and it'll say resources. That's where you want to go. And then it'll list every single one of these forms that I talked about. Goal setting, your rubric. The rubric's the really important one, and I will tell you this right now. This is my advice to you, and it's only to benefit you. It won't benefit me in the least. Go on this website, pull down this rubric, print it off, and this summer read it and plan and know what it is. Because if you are prepared, there's no reason why you can't get to proficient level in all of this. And some of you are going to come up developing in some areas, but overall you'll see the process. We're giving you we're handing you the answers. It's just getting there. Now, planning it, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to spend a lot of time planning. I evaluated a teacher at Bluestone, and so we did the pilot this year together. And I know she told me how much she put into it, and that's not the point of this. That's my one little side note that I just anyone can prepare. If I know you're coming in to evaluate me, I'm going to do my darndest to have the best lesson I can. So there's some glitches to it, but the definition. So then we talked about walkthroughs. So the definition by state, a walkthrough is anything less than 30 minutes. I will assure you that your principals are not going to do 29-minute walkthroughs. I can tell you that because 1, they don't have the time, and 2, they will never ever get to you. Just trust me on that. So Walkthroughs are probably 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 5 minutes in there, but by definition they could technically go up to 29 minutes. Again, not going to happen. I could, now if you get a principal that says for 29 minutes and it's not your observation time, you certainly can come tell me that, and I'll eat my words there. So by definition, again, frequent. It's less than 20 or 30 minutes and should be frequent and unannounced. So we're not going to say, hint, hint, I'm going to be coming through today for a walkthrough. It's just going to happen. And this is dictated by the principal's schedule or the administrator's schedule, when they have time to do their walkthroughs in their building. Then there will be a post-conference that will follow each one of your observations. In that post-conference, I need to share this with you because people that have gone through the pilot said, geez, I just think he was nitpicking me or she was nitpicking me. By law, they have to do two things. They have to come up with, they meaning us as administrators, so principals, refinement and reinforcement. So again, even if you came out proficient or even accomplished, I will just tell you as an evaluator, you have to remember that we are just sitting there observing. It is so easy for us to pick up on every little thing that goes on in the room. When you're teaching and instructing like I am right now, I'm not catching everything. Like if Mr. Paporis is just sitting there observing me right now, and he might catch someone texting in the back, or I might not see it, or whatever, because that's his job. I'm trying to look at everyone, and I'll glance over here, and as a teacher, you're trying to keep on everyone. So our role is just to observe. So we're going to catch all these things that are happening. So in that, with that said, we're going to have an area of refinement for you and reinforcement. So what did you do great? We're going to tell you about that. And then there's always going to be an area that could use some fine-tuning. You might have been accomplished in every area, but what I'm going to do as an evaluator, and what we're trained to do, is look at it holistically. What is the one thing that I could just give some area of refinement for? What is something, and it might even be saying that, you did a great job, everything was great. Just a little suggestion here might be that when you're checking for understanding, blah, blah, whatever it may be. It might be something so minute, but it's some area that at least to point out to you, because there's something, even as phenomenal as the teacher was that I observed, I still had suggestions for her. So then there's this notion of holistic rating. What does that mean? And this is where some debate or some conversation has been had in the sense that you have your self-assessment, you have your goal setting, and then you have two observations. And so you have these clear-cut delineation, and then you have your growth measures. But we know that a lot happens over the span of a year outside of those two 30-minute windows, right, that you're going to be observed. So what the state is saying is they recognize that. So they want us to include walkthroughs, conferences, conversations, colleagues, parents, student input. Now, people always panic with the student input. There is a state, and I wish I could remember which state it was because I was reading an article, but they actually give a survey to the students and use it as part of the teacher's evaluation. We are not doing that, but you know what this means. As a principal, when you walk into a room, people would say to me, well, how do you know I don't have good relationships with kids? You don't even come in the room. But I don't know how to say this to you, but you can just walk by a room and you can hear, or sometimes if I'm just standing outside the door, you can hear a lot. Even in my role now, I can tell you a lot of times what teachers have excellent relationships with kids and those that maybe don't. And in my conversations with kids, when you're just dealing with discipline as a principal, they'll tell you how they feel sometimes about things. And not that I'm going to take a child's 100% of what they say and I'm going to believe everything. Believe me, we know better than that too. Same with parents. If you get one complaint on a teacher and everything else is phenomenal, then you're just going to say, well, maybe this parent wasn't seeing eye to eye. Where, conversely, if I get 10 parent phone calls about the same thing, well, then maybe there's more merit to it. So just giving you some examples of those are some things that they're looking for as a result of looking at this holistic rating system. So it's not just going to be those 30 minutes. So let's say you end up being proficient in both observations. But walkthroughs have revealed that there's chaos in the classroom when I walk by, no learning is taking place. You were able to turn it on for those 30 minutes, and did well, but I'm getting parent complaints, colleagues are saying this person won't collaborate with me, we're having trouble, whatever it may be, and you get all these complaints and you put it all together, then it's the principal's discretion then to say, well, hey, you might have gotten 2 proficients, but here's all my evidence of other stuff, and there should be no surprises. So I'm just one, if I get a parent complaint, and Nikki, I get a call, from a parent, I'm going to tell you about it, because one, you have a right, every one of you have a right to know these things. So I'm not one for dropping any bombs on people. I want you to know. If a colleague came and complained, well, one, those of you who know me, my approach is always, did you talk to the person? Because I don't want to get involved until 2 adults have talked about it. And people know that, and that's why I think I didn't get a whole lot of that, because you knew what I was going to say to you. Did you guys handle it? But like that kind of thing. But if it's something that couldn't be resolved, there was a big outburst and I witnessed it in the hallway or some unprofessional thing took place, I'm gonna, let you guys know, and those are the kinds of things holistically that we're looking at. So I just don't want you to get locked into those two observations and, well, that's it, and that's not. I'm telling you up front that that's not, and that's not the intention of OTES. So, Kristen, if you could click on that link, I'm going to take you, and you obviously don't want to, it's much easier for you just to go to ODE and put in the search button OTES rather than try to write down my site. So if you scroll down, we're going to go to, this is what you'll see, and it says resources, all right? We're going to go to, these are all the forms, and I would encourage you to look at every single one of them. However, the most important is this evaluation rubric, so pull that one up. There's a form for walkthroughs. I want to let you know we are not mandating that our administrators use that. Some will use it, some will not. So if you don't hear anything as a result of a walkthrough, you can pretty much assume that things were okay. I'm going to instruct the principals. They can use the form if they want, and some will, and some will not. But it's just one more piece of paper that I don't want to burden administration with. But with that said, they need to be communicating with you if there's a need, and they will hear that from me next month. We have a meeting. So I know you can't see this. That's why I'm going to read to you. But here is the rubric, and this is what it looks like, and I'll tell you, they do the reverse of how I would do a Likert scale, but ineffective, developing, proficient, accomplished. I would go the other way, but that's just me. Maybe I'm backwards. So starting with ineffective. Now what they teach us in our training, just so you know, is they tell us, I'm very transparent about this, they tell us to look at proficient, okay? So we look at proficient, and we read this, and then we work our way backwards. I'm going to just alleviate some stress right now. In order to get ineffective, this is what you have to do. I'm the teacher. Pretty much sit here like this and do this in order to get ineffective. And it's still going to be a close call. Honestly, ineffective. It is. Yeah. So don't do that, because then you will get ineffective. I told you I was going to get it. You seriously have to do not much of anything. And when you read this rubric, you'll see what I'm saying. Very difficult to get ineffective on your observation. I mean, it's clear, like, this would be things like you don't tell the kids what you're learning. You don't tell them the objective. If you have this in front of you, there's no reason for that to happen, because it says to you explicitly, it lays it out. If you want to be accomplished, tell them what they're learning and why, and say what standard it matches. Right? So we get that, and those are things that you easily can do. I know it's easy to say because you'll be nervous and things like that, but if you map it all out, it's there for you. So the other part that I want to point out to you, you are going to have a pre-conference with your principal or your administrator. I didn't say this in the last one, but I want to elaborate on it now. The pre-conference benefits all of you in this room, and here's why. It benefits me as an observer, and I learned that with my process with the teacher that I observed. But you want to tell your principal, your evaluator, as much as you can in that pre-conference. And here are things you want to hit. You want to tell them previous learning that took place. So what were you doing before, and what will you be doing after this lesson? What kind of lesson was this? It was review. It was new content. Whatever it may be. I have 3 special needs kids in my classroom that are functioning on a 1st grade level, and I'm a 5th grade teacher. Here's what I do to differentiate. Here's how I address their needs. Here's how I collaborate with their special education teacher. These are all hints. Now, the other thing, there's a point in here where it says, I come in the classroom and I'm supposed to see how you embed or incorporate community, parents, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, I'm not going to see that in a lesson. It's not like you're going to have a parent in the back of the room and you're going to say, hey, that doesn't happen. So in a pre-conference, what would you say to me if I said, how are you showing that you involve parents? What are some things you can tell me, teachers? What are things you do? I know you
Daily communication.
Pardon me?
Daily written communication.
Daily written communication. Passports.
Weekly
Newsletters. Exactly. Phone calls. Right. Conferences. All those things. You want to tell your principals that. They need to know this stuff. Don't assume they know either. Don't say by putting a copy of newsletters. My teachers used to do this, and I appreciate it. Don't assume, though, that I saw that newsletter and I took time to read it and all of those things if you're very busy, and they will be. Make sure you point those things out. So in that, what they're looking for in this pre-conference, this is focus for learning. So in this, they're talking a lot about the standards. Make sure that you talk about the standard you're teaching, the objective of the lesson, why it's being taught. The other big one is in this whole evaluation system, and they're big on assessments and accessing prior knowledge and making a connection to students' content knowledge and their experiences. So talk about, you need to reflect it. And that was one thing, even though, again, this teacher was phenomenal that I evaluated, but I couldn't see a connection how she knew about the kid's background. So things that are helpful. And then the next time I caught her saying this, you know, Anto, I know you have a sibling that, you know, likes trains. We're going to talk about trains today. Or, you know, some kind of connection that shows the evaluator that you know a little bit about your kids. Or accessing their prior knowledge. Hey, remember last week when we talked about reptiles? Well, guess what? We're going to read a story today about snakes, and and then you show that connection. So you wanted to make sure that you're connecting those things, the background knowledge, their content knowledge, and showing that you can connect to them. You scroll down just a minute there, please. There's a couple times where assessment, and keep going, assessment comes into play, and that's why I emphasize it a couple times. And differentiation is all in here. And when you pull up the rubric, you'll see all of them. I'm going to read them to you just in a minute. But here's the thing with differentiation. This is, the one-size-fits-all will not work for this evaluation. Remember that. One-size-fits-all will not work. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by one-size-fits-all?
Everybody.
Whole class lesson. Yeah, I'm doing the same thing for everyone, right? Now, unless you have kids who are functioning on the same exact level, which we know is not going to be the case most likely, unless you're a special ed teacher of 3 and they're all on the same level, which can happen if you have a small group. Let's face it, they could have similar levels, but if I'm a classroom teacher, that's not really going to happen. How are you differentiating for those kids in that classroom? So what are you doing? These are things you want to say in a pre-conference. Even if you're doing reading groups, for example. How do I know? If I just walk in and see you doing it and I see kids, and I can make some assumptions that you used a DRA or you used Ames Web information to form your groups. Don't assume I know that. Tell your principal, I formed these groups using this data. Tell he or she that. Okay? That's going to be important because you have to prove that you're instructing kids based on data. If you can, ways to differentiate. Differentiation does not mean planning 6 different lessons for 6 different groups of kids. And that's where we get hung up. And with all of this said, believe me, I have spoken on your behalf on a number of occasions, and I believe this, it is so difficult to differentiate for kids. I think that's something, one, we need to provide PD for. I can tell you in my college years, I don't even know that I heard that word when I was in undergrad. And not that I recall, it doesn't mean it didn't happen, but that's a long time ago. But, you know, it's the level of questioning, or you're providing manipulatives for a kid, and where other kids can maybe do mental math, but these children need something tactile. Or it's just different ways of accommodating kids, of differentiating, doing different things for kids, scaffolding, all those different things. So you want to keep that in mind. That's very, very important. Checks for understanding is the other thing that I'm looking for. Not me, but I know that this is what I want to also point out to you. So how do you know kids are learning? Frequent checks should be happening. You should not teach for 15 minutes and then check for understanding. It's too late. Research says every couple minutes, few minutes, you should be doing some informal way. That could be question and answer. That could be thumbs up, thumbs down. We like that one in elementary ed. The whiteboards, you know, responses, holding up responses, things like that. So make sure you're checking for understanding. If you go, just scroll down. I don't think those are the big ones. Yeah, keep going. Thank you. How you deliver lessons is important, obviously. How you're articulating things, how you're following through on directions, are you giving clear directions, what kind of delivery. It says, you know, strategies. So you're looking at critical thinking, checking for understanding, you're questioning. Those are all things that'll be in here. Now again, if you want to get to accomplished, you read this column. But I always start at proficient. So differentiation is hit again, lesson delivery. Then the resources. There are 2 more, resources and classroom environment. Resources is what I call the lame category. In the order of importance, as an evaluator, I'm not so concerned about resources as I would be as differentiation or classroom environment. Resources, make sure you include a few things. So that could be, like I said, base 10 blocks, you know, manipulatives for math. It could be a graphic organizer, whatever it may be. But the resources you're using, the keys here are 1, to make sure that they're age appropriate, and 2, that they meet the standards. Those are the big ones. So you're not just throwing in some manipulative that has nothing to do with your lesson. You want to make sure that they connect. It's really an easy one to get proficient or accomplished on once you read it. Technology integration, another way, would be a great thing. One more. So classroom environment is a big one. This is what the one example I was talking to you about, how to get accomplished, you have to show community connection or parent connection. And that's not going to happen in 30 minutes, which is why you guys want to read these rubrics and be prepared in your pre-conference. Come with topics. Come with things you want to discuss. They will have a series of questions for you in the pre-conference, but don't be afraid. This is your time to inform them. Now, with that said, don't take an hour of their time, or your time for that matter, but come prepared to go through the bullet items. It should take about 20 minutes is what they say. Okay? They meaning the state that trained us. But classroom environment. What I'm looking for, and Kristen, you go back to my PowerPoint now. Thank you. The classroom environment. I'm looking for mutual respect. Are you making eye contact with the kids? Do you know their names? And special teachers, you know, it's harder for special teachers to know all the kids' names, and so you know, but there are some times when, you know, especially if you're nervous, you might forget a kid's name, or if it's early on observation, or you just got a new kid, you know, but you're looking for those types of things. Is there a climate? Can I tell that this climate is one of respect and encouraging, and kids want to take risks, and they're not afraid to do that? The other thing is, are there established routines and procedures? You can tell coming into a classroom, and you could too if you walked into your colleague's classroom, if they know how to transition, for example. Or talking to you about how to get accomplished, you have to show community connection or parent connection. And that's not going to happen in 30 minutes, which is why you guys want to read these rubrics and be prepared in your pre-conference. Come with topics. Come with things you want to discuss. They will have a series of questions for you in the pre-conference, but don't be afraid. This is your time to inform them. Now, with that said, don't take an hour of their time, or your time for that matter, but come prepared to go through the bullet items. It should take about 20 minutes is what they say. Okay? They meaning the state that trained us. But classroom environment. What I'm looking for, and Kristen, you go back to my PowerPoint now. Thank you. The classroom environment. I'm looking for mutual respect. Are you making eye contact with the kids? Do you know their names? And special teachers, you know, it's harder for special teachers to know all the kids' names, and so you know, but there are some times when, you know, especially if you're nervous, you might forget a kid's name, or if it's early on observation, or you just got a new kid, you know, but you're looking for those types of things. Is there a climate? Can I tell that this climate is one of respect and encouraging, and kids want to take risks, and they're not afraid to do that? The other thing is, are there established routines and procedures? You can tell coming into a classroom, and you could too if you walked into your colleague's classroom, if they know how to transition, for example, or go get books off shelves, or what the signal is if I have to go to the bathroom. Those are all established routines. So those are things that you're looking for. Okay? So now, in the observation, the rubric that we just talked about, the different things, these are the areas in which they're looking for. I kind of went through them all, but focus for learning is all that pre-conference stuff. Getting set for learning, standards, your objectives, why are you learning it, how are you connecting it. Assessment data, we kind of beat that one to death. Make sure you're using data to drive your instruction and be able to prove it. Prior content knowledge, how are you making those connections to kids' prior content knowledge? How well do you know your students? Lesson delivery, the strategies you're using. The differentiation, those are the same thing. We beat that one too. Resources, classroom environment, then assessment, and that we talked about, which, you know, they hit it twice, assessment, data, and assessment. So hit that one hard in your preparation. Differentiation and assessment, hit those hard. Your classroom environment is going to come. You either have it or you're not going to have it in this lesson. You've either established it and got it, or you're not. Now, that's not to say, now I know with your principal standing there, you're not going to say, oh my gosh, you can't get it. I mean, that's just not going to happen. But, you know, you know what I mean. You either have the principles, you know, you'll have it by your first observation or you won't. And so those are things that will just show. And professional responsibilities, there's going to be one category at the end on the rubric that will talk about more like your professionalism, your ethics, your reporting to work on time, communication with others, collaboration. Those are the things that will be hit on that last piece on your rubric, which won't be reflected in the classroom observation per se. Kristen? Almost done. Okay. So, talking about growth measures. What time do I have till? Like, 5 more minutes, 7 more minutes? Don't want 15. 15? Oh, okay. All right. We got a late start due to my report. All right, so the combination of 50%.
Sorry, Kristen has something.
That's okay. Oh, that's right, she does. I forgot, she asked me for 10 minutes. We got started late. Otherwise, I'd give you that's a shine. All right. So the growth measures, what happens here? The 50%, the other 50%. So the performance, the observation, and the walkthroughs and all that is 50%. The other 50% is growth measures. Well, how do we arrive at 50%? This is where the districts have some leeway, and this is what we're currently negotiating, and we reached a tentative agreement, if you will. So you guys are voting on that tomorrow. So the 50% has to add up to 50% would be value-added student learning objectives, which are teacher-created, and vendor assessments. Here's the law, and it's changed, even since I put this presentation together. Value-added, if you are a subject-only teacher of value-added, meaning 7th or 8th grade teacher, I just teach reading, I just teach math. My 50% has to be value-added. That's it. That's in 2 years. Next year, I'm not going to go into all the specifics. You don't have to do it next year. It just has to be the majority of your evaluation of the 50%. But in 2 years, 50% is that. Now, I'm a 4th or 5th grade teacher. I get value-added scores. But what are you responsible for? All the content areas. Because we don't departmentalize, true departmentalizing. So you teach science, social studies, math, reading, right? 4 subjects, let's say. So if reading and math are half of the 4, that's 50%, right? So 50% of the 50% is 25%. So you will be, they're going to come up with a composite score. Please don't ask me to explain all this because they haven't even figured it all out themselves. They meaning the same. The other 25% will be either SLO or vendor assessments. I don't want to play our cards yet. Not that I care. I'd put it out there, but because it's sort of negotiating, you'll learn about it all tomorrow, what we've decided. But vendor assessments, the law on this states, and this is new, if you use a vendor assessment in your district, and we do, what vendor assessments do we use? AIMSweb, and there are others. At the high school we use MAP. I don't know, we'll continue that, but there are other assessments, ACTs we're talking about using. If you use them and they're on the approved vendor list, and AIMSweb is, you must use it as part of your evaluation system. So AIMSweb must be used as part of it. Now, there are other ways around this. There are shared attribution, and then there's individual scores. So value-added is teacher individual. But shared attribution, meaning the school, the grade level, the district can share those scores. I will just tell you that that is the direction in which we're headed, but I'm not going to play all the cards. You'll hear about it tomorrow if you go. But looking at sharing the same notion of gain sharing, right? We do gain sharing. We chose to do as opposed to some districts are linking compensation to performance already with Race to the Top. We chose to do the gain sharing. So that's sort of how we're heading on this. But the combination has to equal 50%. So we could do 25% value added, 10% student, 15% vendor. You can get the idea. You can play with the numbers as long as they add up to 50% of your evaluation. And then I talked about that one. So that's how you determine growth measures. You will find out tomorrow pretty much what we're doing. So don't get hung up on all of this right now. You'll find out. So, Kristen. Okay, so those of you who are visual, and I know you can't see this, and I'm not really, we've touched upon it. I'm just going to point out a few things. This is like a reading chart, you know, like when you get your eye examined, like cover your, let's try, Linda. Cover your right eye. Yeah. I can't barely read anything when I go these days. So teacher performance, the 50%, it's just showing you again the ratings. This is the teacher performance. We've already talked about a lot of this, okay? When you go online, this form is there. But let me just point this out quickly. There are 4 categories of teachers for value added and growth measures. There's 4 categories, and I only have one more slide after this, so we're almost done, I think. So there's an A1, an A2, a B, and a C. An A1 teacher is what I talked to you about, the teacher level value added teacher. That is it. That is what they do. So that's that 7th grade reading teacher, 8th grade math teacher. That's all they teach, a value added course. Then you have the person, such as some of you in here, the 4th, 5th grade teachers, who have value added, and that has to be between 10 and 50% of your teacher's schedule. So the reason being, now I just said you teach 4 courses, so that has to be 25% because you teach 4th and 5th grade, you teach 2 subjects. But let's say you departmentalize and you only teach like 1 course of reading and the rest blah blah. That's why it can be 10%. If you're teaching, that's going to be rare. I mean, that's really, I don't know how that would look, but that doesn't look that way in Euclid. And then you take the LEA measures, the 0 to 40% then is the other stuff. Then you have a teacher who has no value added. That would be your music, or, no, that would be this one. This would be the approved vendor and SLOs. This would be your kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, because you have AIMSweb. We're talking about using AIMSweb in kindergarten a little bit more. But vendor assessment and then your SLOs. Okay? So that's who you are, the K2. Then we have the music, art, PE people who have no vendor assessments and have no vendor assessment, no value added. So that's the LEA measures, the SLOs. Now, I will tell you this in our proposal. We're not exactly aligned with this 100%. And so when you hear what it is that we're doing, because originally we had said SLOs for everything, for music, art, teaching. we're sort of bending the rules a little bit, but I did make a call to Columbus. They said, fine. She was not nice. She's like, you can do it this year, but I could tell you we're watching you, blah, 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 you know. And a lot of districts are doing what we're proposing. So I think Dave came to us with, you know, he has knowledge of a lot of other districts doing what they're doing. So when we talked about it, the state is finding that people are kind of trying to, I don't want to say beat the system, because that's not what's happening, but we're looking for other ways of the shared attribution with value add and things like that. So we're moving away from SLOs this year. But not to say that we're not going to, you are going to have to learn SLOs, I'm sure. And they will reemerge. Just probably not this year for us. Okay, so in conclusion, so far you all hung with me, no one's killed me yet, but you may want to now. Not really, but this is not the fun slide. So the question becomes, how do I know what final evaluation I, this is a very serious crowd today. You guys are, it's hard to make you giggle. It is, I know. At least sometimes I get some laughs in other schools. I mean, no, I'm just kidding, it's not really funny. I know, it's serious stuff. But this is how we arrive at your evaluation. So you might say, well, this could be subjective. It's not. Because what your principals are going to do, your administrators are going to do is they're going to look at your performance, they're going to look at your growth measure, and they're going to do this on the chart. And you all know what this means. So this is accomplished, this is proficient, this is developing, this is ineffective. Remember when I said to you, don't get hung up on proficient and accomplished in your performance, your teacher performance? Here's why. What do you notice about these two columns?
They're the same.
They're the same. So it doesn't matter if you get proficient or accomplished. If your value added, these are your growth measures. I shouldn't say value added, it's growth measures in general, it might not be value added. But this is what you want to look at. If you notice, and you figure this out, there are 4 for teacher performance, 4 areas, and yet 3 for growth measures. So where are they weighing a little more heavily? Right here. So you can do, the only way to get ineffective is what? You have to be below in growth measures, right? And developing or ineffective. That's how you get ineffective. This is going to be such a small proportion of teachers. But a lot of people will fall in developing. If you look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chances of getting developing versus 2 in accomplished, 3 in proficient, 2 in ineffective. So your best chances of anything, if you're looking at probability, is what? Developing and then proficient. And that's where the majority of teachers are going to fall across the state. Just so you know. So what you really want to focus on, if you get above value added, you're in great shape, or above in your growth measure, for getting accomplished. If you can get proficient on your rating, you're in accomplished. But again, really what you need to get to is proficient. So you can even be in developing if you get above. Or you could be proficient and expected. Just so you know, and to alleviate some of your stress, as a district in value added, we do well. We fare well in value added. The reason being is we know that we have a lot of kids who come in below grade level. So they make the growth. The districts that are panicking are who? The districts that are the ones that are already excelling and doing well. Because their level of growth is, you know, they don't have much, their margin is very small. Whereas we have an opportunity to make growth with kids. So that's the one thing. So hopefully you can see this. You really have a shot at being okay. And even developing, what they say is that first year teachers, the first couple of years in your career, 0 to 5 years, should be in developing. People beyond 5 years should be proficient, is what the state says. Now that's not always going to happen, but just know that if you're a beginning teacher, starting out developing is going to happen. And even the first couple of years we get used to the system, it's going to be, you know, a lot of trial and error and learning through this process. So I hope that that helps you explain things. I would strongly encourage you to go online, get your forms, download them, have conversations with your peers in preparation. We have summer or the beginning of next year when it's fresh, you know, going to start up. What are some things you're going to do? How are you going to show this evidence? Things like that. And I'll be glad to help you at any time. This is not, I'm here to help you, and I hope I helped you in this conversation, that you have, you know, took some notes and you know the areas to focus on, because I want you to succeed and I want you to do well, and I think you will. And I think once we get this going, maybe our anxiety levels will go down, but until we see it in action, I understand. Your principals are going through the same thing. I kind of got it at a good time, I think. You know, we will be evaluated as well. Superintendents are going to have a similar system, and we're trickling it right down into central office. So we're going to be having similar evaluations as well. So I'm not out of the fire yet. So I'll be in there with you. But just I understand it's a scary time in education. So any questions, Tina?
Is this alongside Ippy Dippies, or will this eventually replace Ippy Dippies?
It will not have anything to do with the PDFs.
So we still do Ippy Dippies?
Yep.
Yep.
Anyone else? Feel free to call if you have questions as well. Yes.
Julie and I have a question relating to,
Nothing like out in Julia back there.
and it doesn't relate to a lot of people, which is why I wasn't going to ask it, but self-contained special ed classrooms. I mean, do we have any idea where we're going to be on the student growth measures?
Everyone will be treated the same. So you know how you do teacher linkage?
Well, like for alternative assessment, is that going to be, I mean, or I don't have alternative assessment, I have little kids, so.
Yeah. You will still have to produce some form of growth.
Absolutely.
So if we do, again, without playing, if we do this notion of shared attribution, you won't really have to worry about much of this. If you get building attribution or shared attribution, just maybe that might happen. So if that happens, you don't have to be so concerned. But if there comes a time where we look at individual classrooms, you might go to SLOs.
And then we'd have to come up with some sort of.
Yep, you would then base SLOs, and I know I didn't go into, I did not touch this at all, but it's based on baseline data. You have to collect baseline data and then stretch the child to the end of the year in their growth. That's it in a nutshell.
And then we would